You don't remember when it began. There was no single day, no defining moment when everything changed. It was gradual, like smoke seeping beneath your door. First, a subtle heaviness in your chest. Then the silence between your thoughts grew louder. The activities you once loved felt distant and hollow. People spoke and you nodded, but inside you felt yourself disappearing. You've been calling it depression. Everyone does. But what if you're wrong? What if this darkness isn't the end of you, but the beginning of something profound? Carl Jung, one of the 20th century's most influential psychologists, spent 6 years descending into similar darkness. He didn't call it a breakdown. He called it a descent into the self. This journey produced his most mysterious and sacred work. The Red Book, filled with visions, symbols, and conversations with figures from his unconscious. A message emerges from these pages for those experiencing what modern society hastily labels depression. You are not broken. You are awakening. This isn't spiritual platitude. It's psychological excavation. Right now you feel lost. Your passions have withered. You wake exhausted. Goals that once motivated you now seem pointless. When asked what's wrong, words fail you. You cry in private while projecting strength in public. Here's what Jung discovered: depression isn't always a malfunction. Sometimes it's the soul withdrawing from a life it no longer recognizes as authentic. You're not broken. You're being summoned inward, pulled into the underworld of your own unconscious. Like Jung, you're meant to navigate this internal chaos, not to escape it, but to be transformed by it. The Red Book wasn't merely a diary. It was a map documenting what happens when a human being stops performing and starts confronting everything they've repressed. Jung wrote it during what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. He experienced visions, heard voices, and encountered inner figures who shattered his concept of self. What he discovered wasn't madness, it was truth. Consider this question: what if your numbness exists because your current self has nothing meaningful left to express? What if your depression isn't primarily a chemical imbalance, but a soul imbalance? What if the life you've constructed, the roles, titles, and goals, was never truly yours, and now the mask is disintegrating? Your soul is staging a rebellion. Jung observed people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But not you. If you're reading these words, you're beginning to recognize that your pain isn't random, it's a message. Your depression is communicating something vital about the false self you've become accustomed to being. Imagine yourself in a house. Every room bustles with people. You've smiled, performed roles, maintained peace. You've tried to belong. But now you've quietly descended into the basement. The light is dim. You're alone. It's cold. This is where most people panic. They rush back upstairs to noise, comfort, distraction. But if you remain here, if you sit in this basement long enough, something remarkable happens. You begin hearing whispers, not from outside, but from deep within. One voice says, "I've been waiting for you." That voice is your authentic self, the one you abandoned to survive, the one who never wanted perfection, only wholeness. The Red Book chronicles what happened when Jung didn't flee back upstairs. He stayed. He sat in darkness. He engaged with the chaos. He didn't find immediate answers. He encountered confusion, archetypal figures, and what appeared to be madness. But through it all, he continued listening. Eventually, he found his soul. This means you may not need medication. You may not need to snap out of it. You may not need to force smiles or adjust your attitude. Perhaps you simply need to descend, to stop resisting, to allow your constructed identity to crumble, to sit in silence until your genuine self speaks. You're not weak. You're not lazy. You're not doomed. You're being called, pulled inward by something more ancient than society, more profound than trauma, more fundamental than thoughts. The unconscious is summoning you. If you dare enter fully, you won't emerge the same. That's precisely the point. What if you're not depressed? What if you're finally hearing the voice you've been fleeing your entire life? What if that voice is your authentic self? You might believe this darkness is personal, your failure, your inadequacy, your unique burden. But what if this experience was never meant to be a diagnosis? What if it's a doorway? The Red Book wasn't Jung's method of escaping darkness. It was his way of making contact with it, listening to it, discovering what lay hidden within. Our modern world has sterilized depression, reducing it to chemistry, serotonin levels, and self-care buzzwords. But Jung understood something more profound and liberating. The sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of being. He believed the soul withdraws from consciousness, not because it's damaged, but because it's being ignored by performance, by attachments, by the need to maintain normality. When Jung's soul withdrew, he didn't attempt to fix it or flee from it. He followed it into visions, myths, what some might call madness. The Red Book documents his journey through symbolic landscapes, deserts, serpents, war gods, divine mothers, towers, ruins. He called this realm the collective unconscious, a spiritual ecosystem more ancient than your thoughts, culture, or individual identity. Within it, he discovered not just chaos, but messages. In the Red Book, Jung encounters Philemon, a wise prophetic figure who guides him through the madness. Philemon isn't literally real, but he embodies truth, representing the inner guide we all possess, one who remains silent until we create internal quiet. Then there's the Red One, a shadowy, seductive force representing pleasure, destruction, and suppressed desire. Jung doesn't fight these figures or try to escape them. He listens, because these entities aren't hallucinations. They're fragments of himself, aspects of his psyche, long forgotten, rejected, buried. Here's where truth becomes confrontational: depression. In Jung's view, isn't the absence of happiness. It's the invasion of truth. Truth about the inauthentic friendships you've maintained, the goals you've pursued that weren't truly yours, the versions of yourself you've worn like armor just to feel safe. The soul begins revolting. But this revolution doesn't manifest as screaming. It appears as numbness, exhaustion, apathy, detachment. Your psyche is shutting down surface signals because it needs you to go deeper. Jung's Red Book experience remains relevant because he stopped treating the unconscious as a disease and started recognizing it as a language of symbols, dreams, seemingly random moods and emotions that resist logical explanation. What we call depression, Jung termed initiation, a psychic death. Like all deaths, it's messy. You lose motivation, clarity, relationships. You even lose your sense of identity. But beneath the ashes, something else struggles to emerge. A self that's authentic rather than performative, unapologetic rather than people-pleasing. This awakening isn't pretty. It resembles falling apart. You might isolate yourself, cry without obvious cause, experience rage, shame, guilt, even spiritual nausea. You might lose all desire. You might feel emotionally dead. But as Jung observed, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Becoming real isn't merely a choice, it's a sacrifice. You sacrifice being liked for being whole, being understood for being authentic, being comfortable for being fully alive. Depression is merely the surface name for a soul undergoing radical realignment. Society encourages medicating, avoiding, or distracting from this process. Because a person awakening is dangerous, they can't be sold illusions anymore. They don't chase counterfeit love. They walk away from inauthenticity. They perceive clearly. They live by truth rather than approval. If you feel like you're losing your mind, if your familiar world seems to be dissolving, if you can no longer produce convincing smiles, don't panic. You're not broken. You're becoming someone who refuses to play dead for acceptance, someone who no longer waits for permission to feel. You're not regressing or disintegrating. You're awakening within a reality that was never designed to contain the fullness of who you are. The pain you feel is the pressure of an expanding soul trying to inhabit an insufficient life. It's your inner world fracturing open. It's your unconscious declaring, this life no longer fits. Become something more. That's not depression, that's awakening. No one warns you about what follows the initial awakening. People discuss healing and growth, but they rarely mention the part where you feel like you're dying, not physically but spiritually. When you finally stop pretending, when your soul draws you inward, when external noise fades, you're left with silence, and it's deafening. You thought awakening would feel luminous, but initially it feels like loss. You stop desiring things you once obsessed over. You stop relating to people you used to laugh with. Familiar environments feel foreign. Music you loved sounds hollow. Ambitions crumble in your hands. You no longer recognize yourself. This is terrifying, but it's also the only path forward. As Jung revealed through the Red Book, enlightenment doesn't come from imagining figures of light, but by making darkness conscious. And that darkness isn't outside you, it is you. It's the parts you repressed to be liked, accepted, safe. Several transformations occur when your soul awakens. First, relationships begin collapsing, not suddenly but gradually, like bridges buckling under weight they were never designed to support. Conversations feel superficial. You notice how you were always listening, fixing, accommodating. Then one day you simply stop. You stop initiating contact, stop forcing laughter to maintain peace, stop sustaining dead friendships. In response, people call you distant, cold, changed. They're right. You're not the same. You've stopped pretending. Second, you grieve your former self, the people-pleaser, perfectionist, overachiever, the quiet one, the strong one. These were survival masks. Though they caused pain, they protected you. They helped you navigate a world that rewards conformity, not authenticity. As you discard them one by one, don't be surprised by emptiness. That emptiness isn't the end. It's sacred space where something genuine can finally grow. Third, you experience emotional whiplash, calm one moment, rage the next, then tears, numbness, clarity, despair. You might think something's wrong, but Jung would say, this is exactly right. As the unconscious rises, it brings everything: childhood wounds, suppressed guilt, repressed anger, shameful fantasies. They emerge not to destroy you, but to be acknowledged. Until now, they've controlled your life from shadows. Now they're surfacing, creating chaos, but necessary chaos. Fourth, external validation loses its appeal. You stop chasing followers, money, applause, not because you don't care, but because these no longer fulfill you. You share something meaningful online, nobody responds, and your day continues undisturbed. You speak your truth. If misunderstood, you accept it. You realize approval was the drug keeping your true self sedated. Now that you've detoxed, you're drawn to something else: silence, solitude, self-respect. Fifth, you become a mirror, perhaps the most unexpected consequence. Your presence triggers others, not because you've said anything wrong, but because your authenticity reflects what others are hiding from. You speak calmly, they feel judged. You establish boundaries, they feel abandoned. You tell truth, they feel exposed. You've become a mirror, and people don't always appreciate what they see in it. But it's not your job to make the reflection flattering. Jung's awakening through the Red Book brought him to this exact place: isolation, vision, conflict, freedom. He lost friends, people called him mad. Even fellow psychologists distanced themselves. But he couldn't return to his previous state. Once you've glimpsed your soul, you can't unsee it. You can't resume pretending you're fine without it. This awakening phase can last weeks, months, years. There's no predictable timeline, but it inevitably leads toward truth. Truth isn't concerned with comfort. It arrives with fire, but leaves you with clarity. You begin feeling lighter, more precise, more grounded, not perpetually happy, but authentic. That's a joy no artificial smile can replicate. If you're currently in darkness, in pain, in confusion, know this: you're not alone. You're not failing, you're not dying, you're transforming. The old self, the mask, the performance, the illusion is breaking. Allow it, because something sacred is forming beneath the rubble. You've endured the ache, you've sat in silence, you've lost relationships, energy, identity. Now what? You are no longer who you were, but not yet fully who you're becoming. You're in between, and this liminal space is where new identity forges itself. Not through willpower or affirmations, but through surrender. Breaking free isn't about escape, it's about integration. If you flee from pain, you'll recreate it wearing new disguises. If you deny the shadow, it returns through addiction, toxic relationships, or hollow success. If you avoid the descent, you remain half awake your entire life. Jung didn't become powerful by avoiding madness. He became powerful by walking through it consciously. On the other side, he returned not with mere theories, but with transformative fire. Here's the path to liberation, not as a coping mechanism, but as a soul rising from its own ashes. First, release the need to be understood. You've spent your life explaining yourself to parents, friends, society. No more. You weren't born to be understood. You were born to be whole. Some people will call you selfish, cold, strange, distant. That's okay. As Jung recognized, being misunderstood is the price of authenticity. When you no longer seek validation, you become free, and your truth becomes its own protection. Second, accept that you aren't who you thought. Your identity was constructed through survival trauma, people-pleasing projection. You thought you were strong because you didn't cry, kind because you never said no, healed because you stayed busy. Now you recognize this for what it was, compensation. Letting go feels like death because it is death. You're mourning a version of yourself who was just trying to be loved. Don't hate this former self. Don't shame them, thank them, then bury them, and move forward. Third, build rituals around silence. In the Red Book, Jung didn't just think, he listened. He journaled, he painted, he walked, he meditated. He treated silence as a temple, not a punishment. Do likewise. Don't flee silence, enter it. Let it speak, let it echo. Let it reveal what your mind has never dared confront. Silence isn't empty. It's filled with truth you've never heard because external noise was too loud. Fourth, create new internal principles. When your old world collapses, don't attempt to rebuild the same structure, build differently. Write a new code. I no longer trade authenticity for acceptance. I no longer chase what leaves me empty. Protect my peace as sacred because it is. I walk away without guilt. I express what's real, not what's easy. I no longer explain my worth, it's self-evident. I give love but never beg for it. Let this code anchor you. The external world will try pulling you back. When it does, your new self will simply respond, I don't live there anymore. Fifth, transcend the label of depression. This may be most controversial, but hear it fully. You are not your diagnosis. You are not your pain. You are not a victim of your chemistry. This doesn't mean your suffering isn't real. It means there's something deeper beneath it. The Red Book doesn't offer a cure, it offers context. Depression in Jung's framework wasn't an end state, it was a soul state, a phase of descent. And descent is sacred because it prepares for rebirth. Stop trying to revert to who you were before darkness descended. That person was never your authentic self. Start acting differently, not from fear, but from clarity. Say no without guilt. Leave situations that drain you. Rest before burnout. Stop speaking when others stop listening. Stop performing for love. Let silence carry your message. You no longer need the world to validate your existence. You've remembered you were real before you were ever rewarded. This isn't about becoming someone new, it's about removing everything that was never truly you. That's what Jung accomplished. When he returned from his inner hell, he didn't just write theories, he transformed psychology. He altered history because he dared face what most avoid himself. You possess this same power. But it won't emerge through struggle. It comes through surrender, through sitting in your own fire long enough to realize you were never broken, just buried. Now you rise, not perfectly but truthfully. You walk differently now with sight, not with arrogance but with gravity, not to impress but simply to exist. You'll lose people, let them go. You'll question yourself, keep walking. You'll feel alone. But in that solitude, you'll encounter the only person who truly matters, you. The one who didn't run, the one who weathered the storm, the one who sat with shadows, the one who kept breathing through silence. Now that you've glimpsed truth, you'll never again trade it for comfort. Here's the final echoing truth that resides in every soul. Brave enough to descend and return, you are not depressed. You are remembering who you are, and you're not finished. You're just beginning. This perspective doesn't minimize clinical depression's reality or suggest abandoning professional treatment. Rather, it offers an additional framework, one that honors the potential wisdom within emotional suffering. Depression may indeed involve biological factors requiring medical intervention, but even while addressing those factors, we can simultaneously explore the soul's message in our distress. Jung himself remained a physician even while exploring the spiritual dimensions of psychological suffering. He recognized that integration requires honoring both the scientific and the symbolic understanding of human experience. True healing often involves multiple approaches: medication when necessary, therapy when helpful, and soul work always. If you find yourself in darkness now, consider keeping a journal documenting your descent, like Jung did with the Red Book. Record dreams, draw images that emerge, write dialogues with the parts of yourself that are struggling to be heard. This practice alone can begin transforming suffering into meaning. Remember that Jung's descent lasted 6 years. Authentic transformation isn't instant. The soul operates on its own timeline, often much slower than our impatient modern minds prefer. The darkness may extend longer than you expect, but the light, when it emerges, will be genuinely yours, not borrowed or artificial. Whether you call it depression or awakening ultimately matters less than how you relate to it. Will you fight against it, seeing it only as pathology to be eliminated? Or will you also listen to it, allowing it to guide you toward greater authenticity and wholeness? The choice to flee upstairs to comfortable distraction or sit in the basement until your true voice emerges remains yours. The greatest gift of Jung's Red Book may be the permission to trust your journey through darkness, to recognize that sometimes breaking down is breaking through. The invitation stands. Will you follow your soul into the depths, trusting that what awaits isn't just madness, but meaning? Will you allow depression to be not just an ending, but a beginning? The darkness waits for your answer.